So look at this narrow passage between the north of Morocco and the southern part of the Spanish region. It's called the Strait of Gibraltar. There are only 8 miles between the two continents, but for some reason, there's no bridge, despite people having been dreaming for centuries about connecting these two regions. There are places in the world where a bridge over water stretches for a much greater distance. For example, the Lake Pontchartrain Causeway near New Orleans, Louisiana, goes for 24 miles, which is 3 times the length of the hypothetical bridge between Africa and Europe. That's listed in the Guinness Book of World Records as the longest continuous bridge passing over water. It consists of 2 parallel bridges and connects the urban area of New Orleans with small settlements in the north of Lake Pontchartrain. 9,000 concrete piles hold more than 1,000 decks above the water. This large-scale structure was built in the middle of the 20th century. It only took 14 months from the start of construction to its completion. American engineers created a unique technology for attaching concrete piles to the base of the bridge, and this bridge is still functioning. So, what's the problem with building a shorter bridge to connect Africa and Europe? Let's first find out the value of the 8-mile bridge that could connect 2 continents and the reason why everyone is talking about it. In fact, the value of such a bridge would be enormous. Diamonds, oil, minerals. Africa is full of valuable materials, and Europe is happy to buy these things. This theoretical bridge could allow people to transport things for trade quickly and comfortably. But now, the exchange of goods between Africa and Europe is only possible thanks to airplanes and cargo ships, and airplanes are extremely expensive because of hefty fuel price tags. In addition, air travel is often delayed because of bad weather. There are long customs procedures and transportation from the airport to the destination. Ships can also be a problem. The narrow area of the Mediterranean Sea, where the 2 continents are closest to each other, is a dangerous place because of storms and strong currents. The transportation of your diamonds is highly dependent on weather conditions. The second advantage of such a bridge would be the creation of tens of thousands of jobs. People from Europe and Africa would build hotels, ports, parks, and even small towns for each other. The coastal parts of both continents would become a new economic center. And just imagine how much investment those places would attract. Europe and Africa would be much closer than ever before. You could drive from a small Spanish town to a safari park in northern Morocco, buy Moroccan tea, get some argan oil, and go home for the evening. Or you could take a high-speed train across the beautiful Mediterranean Sea. People would open hundreds of restaurants, amusement parks, shopping malls, and a museum next to this bridge. But, unfortunately, it's impossible to build such a bridge, at least at the moment. And here's why. The main problem is the Strait of Gibraltar itself, because of its strong currents and seismic activity. How can you start large-scale construction if, in a couple of days, an underwater earthquake can trigger giant waves and take all the ships underwater? Even if you build a bridge, rapid streams of water that constantly change direction can shake the entire structure and tear the connecting parts of the construction. The bridge over the Strait of Gibraltar must have a strong, sturdy system that will withstand seismic activity. Huge resources are required to create such a complex structure. Despite the dangerous passage between the 2 continents, it remains one of the busiest points in the world. It's the only place on the planet connecting the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. About 300 ships pass through this area every day. Not only merchant ships, but also fishing vessels and tourist boats. There are not so many places in the world where you can watch whales coming out of the water. Not only people, but also marine creatures often visit this passage because of the peculiarities of the sea currents. But we'll talk about that later. Another problem is the depth of the strait. In simple words, any bridge over the water is built on long metal piles. Builders and engineers stick piles into the seabed and use them as a holding base for the whole construction. But installing such piles firmly enough is a difficult task because of the uneven seabed. The seabed has a unique geological landscape, irregularities, and different densities of the Earth's rock. There are also reefs, rocks, and pits. Any seabed requires extensive geological studies before piles are installed. However, the bottom of the Strait of Gibraltar is especially difficult because of its depth, almost 3,000 feet. It's one of the deepest straits in the whole world. Just imagine, you'll need the height of 10 Statues of Liberty to reach the surface of the water from the bottom of the strait. What kind of pile should be used there to hold the entire bridge? Most likely, one pile will have to consist of several parts connected into one large metal rod. And don't forget about seismic activity. Let's say you've installed perfectly strong piles, but the next day an earthquake occurs and destroys the entire structure. And a strong current is carrying fortifications all over the Mediterranean Sea. The next problem is probably the most important one, because it concerns marine life. The Strait of Gibraltar has a high salt content. This natural element makes water heavier and makes it descend to the bottom of the deep Mediterranean basin. Then, this salt water pushes up cold water from the seabed into the Atlantic Ocean. These changes in water density, as well as fast currents, create sea vortices and turbulence. It's like a raging cauldron of cold water that raises a lot of nutrients to the surface. The hollows and hills of the Strait of Gibraltar are filled with different substances and sunlight, and this creates ideal conditions for the formation of phytoplankton. Whales, dolphins, and other marine creatures adore this delicacy. That's why you can see about 7 species of whales and dolphins in this place. What might happen to phytoplankton after the start of global construction? Carbon dioxide, crushed rock, tons of dust and ashes, falling building materials. All of this could significantly pollute the environment. Without phytoplankton, many fish would go extinct. Without fish, thousands of fishers wouldn't be able to get food and earn money. But even if the bridge was built, cars and trains would continue to pollute the air and water. This disruption of the delicate balance in this narrow strait can lead to larger-scale environmental disasters. Dolphins and whales may leave to look for food elsewhere, and thus take resources from other marine inhabitants. Like falling dominoes, one problem can follow another. And all this because of one bridge. In 2007, the Spanish Ministry of Environmental Protection introduced speed limits for all ships sailing through the strait in order to not disrupt the delicate balance of nature. At the beginning of the 20th century, a French engineer proposed a project of a bridge, but it was rejected because it was too complicated and costly. People also tried to develop a 23-mile-long tunnel, but this project also faced financial and technical difficulties. People are still dreaming of a bridge over the Strait of Gibraltar. Perhaps, in the future, when we develop cooler technologies, we'll be able to build this thing. Oh, by the way, there hasn't always been water between these two regions. In the distant past, the two continents were connected. The entire Mediterranean Sea is the remains of the Tethys Sea that existed before the era of dinosaurs. Then the African and Indian plates collided with the Eurasian one, and the Tethys Sea completely disappeared. In its place, a land bridge was formed that separated the Mediterranean Sea from the ocean. Without access to water, the sea dried up about 6 million years ago. But then, when the bridge came down, the water began to fill the dried-up pool. For tens of thousands of years, the narrow plate sank lower and lower, and the Mediterranean Sea eventually got its current water levels.
To build an underwater structure, you'll need some interesting engineering. A large bridge over a river or bay has its foundation rooted underwater. It's even more complicated with undersea tunnels. Underwater construction is challenging. Engineers need to deal with water pressure and corrosion from salt water. There's also a problem of finding suitable materials. The most typical of them are concrete, steel, and acrylic glass. Concrete doesn't care about water currents and doesn't get damaged by salt water. Steel provides underwater constructions with a strong structure. And acrylic glass is tough, long-lasting, and resistant to sunlight. It's also transparent. That's why it's often used to make windows in underwater buildings. Anyway, when the water is shallow, it's not that hard to build something there. Constructors create a temporary foundation. Then, on top of it, they build several piers supporting the upper structure. But if the waters are deep, engineers have to use other methods. Depending on which one they choose, water is either extracted or diverted during the construction process. One such method involves using a set of large driven piles. Those are long, thin columns made mostly of steel, but their interior is partially hollow. With the help of a huge hammer, they get driven into the waterbed, like nails are driven into a piece of wood. After that, these steel columns get filled with concrete through a special tube. The concrete displaces the water that was in the pile before. Concrete has the ability to set even when it's surrounded by water. That's why driven piles eventually turn into a stable foundation for overwater and underwater constructions. Driven piles are a very cost-effective way of building something that has to be fixed in place. They prevent things from being moved by the water current. Another way to build underwater structures is cofferdams. They are built temporarily and allow workers to create a dry space for the construction. The water gets pumped out of this enclosure, and the cofferdam works like a dam. A completed cofferdam looks like a massive pit with high walls surrounded by water. Cofferdams are made of rocks, steel, and even dirt. These constructions can be built fast and removed even faster. But the process of putting up a cofferdam is complicated and challenging for engineers. They have to make sure the structure won't flood or collapse. The simplest way to build a cofferdam is to pile up loads of dirt. But in this case, workers usually have to somehow make the construction stronger. It helps to protect it from the damage caused by water. Once the cofferdam is ready, pumps extract the water from its interior. Sometimes it's too expensive to build a very deep and strong cofferdam. In this case, constructors use several powerful pumps that get rid of excess water when it seeps through the cofferdam walls. If a cofferdam starts to fail, this process is slow and, luckily, predictable. On the construction site, there are not only main but also backup pumps. In case of emergency, they can kick into overdrive. Then, the water is kept out for the time the personnel needs to evacuate. Cofferdams are most often used during the construction of dams and bridges. But when a large ship, like a modern cruise liner, needs to be repaired, engineers use cofferdams too. Such vessels are too massive to be hauled ashore, and a cofferdam makes a perfect dry lock. The ship gets isolated from the water, and mechanics can repair it wherever it sits. Also, when a cruise ship needs to be expanded, engineers construct a cofferdam around it. Then they pump out all the water from the inside, creating a dry working place. The ship gets cut into two parts, and the process of its lengthening begins. There are several main types of cofferdams: braced, cellular, rock-filled, or earthen. For each of them, engineers need to figure out the best depth at which the wall should be put into the ground. It depends on the type of soil and the water reservoir itself. Braced cofferdams are mostly used during shallow water construction. Such a structure is actually a wall of sheet piles. Those are parts with interlocking edges. Usually, they're made of steel, but the material can also be reinforced concrete or timber. Sheet piles create something like a box around the needed area. Cellular cofferdams are also made of sheet piles, but in this case, the piles have a special shape. After being connected, they form cells that get filled with soil or clay. The cells, in turn, create a watertight wall. Thanks to its structure, it's exceptionally stable. Rock-filled cofferdams are used when there's a lot of rock at the construction site. They're built over the soil. This prevents the water from seeping into the cofferdam, and the rocks serve as reinforcement. Earthen cofferdams are built in areas where the water is less than 10 feet deep. They're created from the materials that are at hand: clay, sand, and even soil. There are also single-walled and double-walled cofferdams. The first type is used when the area of the construction isn't large and the depth is more than 20 feet. Such cofferdams are typically necessary for building bridges. Timber or wooden sheets are put into the sea or riverbed. After that, iron or steel sheets are added on the inside. On both sides of the wall, workers place half-filled bags of sand. Finally, the water gets pumped out and the cofferdam is ready for use. The double-walled cofferdam is used for large construction areas and when the water is very deep. Such construction sites need more powerful supports. This stronger cofferdam has two walls, which provides it with extra stability. Two piles get pushed into the waterbed with some space in between. The deeper it is, the bigger the space between the walls. Then they get attached to each other. After that, this space gets filled with soil. Cofferdams aren't cheap. This means that if one is used for a project, there are no other available options. For example, it's the best way to construct permanent dams. When the Hoover Dam was built, Several cofferdams were put up to divert the water from the Colorado River. As soon as the project is finished, the water is pumped back into the cofferdam, and its walls, whatever they are, get removed. One more way of underwater construction is caissons. They're watertight structures that are put into the water. Even open, they remain dry inside. Workers can keep digging down until they reach some solid surface. That's where the caisson will be placed upon. What's so different about caissons is that they eventually become parts of the foundation for, let's say, a bridge or a dam. And even though you might not think of a bridge or a dam as an underwater construction, most of their crucial elements are underwater. For example, a large bridge wouldn't be able to hold its weight without massive supporting towers, and they stand in the water. There are several types of caissons: open, pneumatic, and box. Open caissons have no bottom. They're actually just vertical walls that allow builders to dig at the bottom of them. Pneumatic caissons keep the water from seeping through by using compressed air. This helps to maintain equal pressure inside and outside the construction. When workers dig out some materials, these get sent up through a special muck tube. When the caisson reaches the bedrock, workers fill it with concrete. Unlike others, a box caisson has a floor, and workers lower it onto a foundation that is constructed in advance. During the construction of the Brooklyn Bridge, engineers used two massive caissons. Thanks to them, they reached the bedrock and created the foundation for the towers of the bridge. And then there's also off-site construction. That's when things are not only built, but also assembled away from the site. In this case, engineers often use modular construction. That's when factory-produced building units are delivered to the site. There, they get assembled, like a giant Lego set. Structures are then usually floated to the site on huge barges, or they get towed there. After that, they're lowered in place. Some sink under their own weight. Others can only reach the seafloor after getting loaded with additional weights. This method of construction is rather expensive, and still, it's much more cost-effective than building right underwater. The latter needs skilled engineers and unique tools, and don't forget about the risks. But what about underwater tunnels? How on earth are they constructed? Modern tunnels are usually built with the help of massive tunnel boring machines. They even have a nickname, moles. Even though such a mechanism has an exorbitant price, several $1 million, it needs little time to create a long tunnel. The machine moves forward very slowly. It has a special circular plate with rotating disc cutters. They can easily chew through solid rock. The rock is then dropped onto an outboard conveyor belt. Another mechanism uses this rock to construct the tunnel's lining in the mole's wake. This way, the mole not only excavates the tunnel, but also reinforces the walls that will later support it. This method, and 11 huge tunnel boring machines, was used to build the 32-mile-long Channel Tunnel, and the whole process took only 3 years. Cut and cover is another method of creating a tunnel underwater. First, workers dig a trench in the ocean floor or riverbed. Then, they put concrete or steel tubes there, made in advance. After the tubes get covered with a thick layer of rock, the sections are connected. All workers have to do is pump out the water. That's how the Ted Williams Tunnel, connecting Logan Airport with South Boston, was built. There, they used 12 enormous steel tubes, more than 300 feet each, and the tubes contained already fully constructed roads.
The Amazon River travels through 9 South American countries at a length of over 4,000 miles. Still, it's impossible to cross it by a bridge. With the river being the main highway, traveling through this dense forest, and so few areas populated around the river, there's just no reason to have one. The river can rise up to 30 feet, and the river crossings that were only 3 miles wide can expand to over 30 miles in just a few short weeks in certain spots, making a bridge nearly impossible to build here. In New Zealand, in the coastal town of Mauriki, there are huge spherical boulders. Some rocks are 6.5 feet tall and weigh about 7 tons, as much as 10 cows. Ooh, there's a 10-cow boulder. Maori legend has it that these rocks are from the remains of the goods from a large shipwreck that happened hundreds of years ago. From a more scientific perspective, it's sand and gravel combined to form these giant boulders. Waves and winds give them a smooth, round appearance over time. The whole process might take millions of years. Indonesia's Kaiwan Ijen volcano is famous for a stunning turquoise-colored lake sitting at the top of the peak, but don't dip in. It's an acid lake. But its scariest part is the sulfuric gases leaking out when lava flows freely, reaching temperatures hotter than 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. When those gases come in contact with the air, they combust into a spectacular electric blue flame. That's why the volcano has blue lava. The island of Surtsey, south of Iceland, was formed over 50 years ago by a volcanic eruption. It all began back in 1963 when a powerful volcanic eruption created one of the youngest islands on the planet. All sorts of bacteria, fungi, and molds began taking over the island, leading to numerous other animals finding their way here, like seals and birds. Birds and ocean waves deposited seeds all over the island. Sadly, the island's getting smaller now because of water and wind erosion. Located off the coast of Brazil, there's an island called… I'm a bit rusty on my Portuguese, so here it is on the screen. It looks perfectly untouched and pristine. Bad news? Dangerous snakes overrun it completely, so take a doctor with you in case you want to go there. Over 4,000 of the golden lancehead vipers inhabit this island. These 3-foot-long snakes are among the most venomous in the entire world. I think I'll skip that. Landing down under, you can see the Opera House, Uluru, lots of kangaroos, and catch the strangest wave of the world, Wave Rock in Western Australia. It's not made of water, but stone. It can be up to 50 feet tall and almost 300 feet long. It's especially incredible after rains in winter when the Western Australian wildflowers fill up the entire landscape. In Atlanta, there's a World of Coca-Cola museum. The formula for the secret recipe is in a large security vault, heavily guarded at all times. Only a handful of people can get through those vault doors. Since its creation in 1886, the company has kept it a secret for only the most honest employees. In 2006, a former worker tried to sell the formula to Pepsi, only for Pepsi to call the police and inform Coca-Cola. The Polka Dot Lakes is a must for anyone who is in British Columbia. After the summer's scorching heat evaporates the lake's water, it leaves behind yellow, blue, and green water spots. These pools are full of all sorts of minerals, like sodium, calcium, and magnesium sulfates that get concentrated in the pools. You can't get too close or even dip your feet into them. A fence protects the entire lake with a sign about how culturally and ecologically sensitive the area is. In Death Valley, California, there's a mystery of the sailing stones. Since the early 1900s, the mystery of how all these stones were seemingly moving by themselves across the desert floor baffled everyone. Some believe that the rocks move by thin pieces of ice around the stones pushed by winds after winter. No one ever saw any of these rocks moving until 2014. Scientists set time-lapse recorders, and the footage showed the rocks sliding along the ground over time. The marble caves in Chile, located in the beautiful area of Patagonia, formed from over 6,000 years of waves wearing down the rocks. The crystal blue walls reflect the vibrant turquoise water, making it perfect for kayaking. Walking in Chestnut Ridge Park in New York, one can see an eternal flame. What makes this one stand out, though, is it's underneath a waterfall. Occasionally, the flame will go out for short periods, but it will light up again. Sometimes it's thanks to certain hikers along the way. If you ever stop your car on a magnetic hill in New Brunswick, Canada, you'll see the car might start rolling backwards up the hill, all by itself. While it looks like it's moving the wrong way, this is just an illusion. There are several hills like this all around the world. What looks like an incline is the opposite, all because there's no horizon for perspective. The brightest bioluminescent bay in the world, called Puerto Mosquito, is located off the coast of Puerto Rico. The bay is named for the pirate Roberto Cofresi and his small boat El Mosquito, not after those annoying insects. During the summer months, you'll have glassy water at night with millions of tiny microorganisms bumping into each other and emitting blue light. The Chocolate Hills in the Philippines is a group of unusually shaped hills located in the middle of the island of Bohol in the Philippines. There are 1,000 to 2,000 discovered so far. They have nothing to do with chocolate at all, but they resemble the color after the dry season, when the grass turns from green to brown. In the northeastern part of Thailand, 466 miles away from Bangkok, is a 75-million-year-old rock formation sticking right out of the mountains. Their shapes look just like a pod of whales swimming together. No wonder this place is called Three Whale Rocks. Millions of years ago, this area was just a desert, but this land has changed quite dramatically during this time. These sandstone mountains were lifted up by plate tectonics, that's the shifting of the crust layers, called lithosphere, and erosion by the Mekong River, resulting in the strangely shaped rock formations we see today. Salar de Uyuni in Bolivia is the world's largest salt flat. At 4,050 square miles in size, it's twice as large as Grand Canyon National Park. After winter has passed, the salt lake is transformed into a beautiful giant sky-reflecting mirror between September and May. With salt all the way to the horizon, it creates an illusion of endlessness. The thin layer of water left over from ice melting creates a shimmering effect of the sky, making it one of the best places to visit in the world. The Catatumbo River in Venezuela might be the stormiest place in the world, with nearly 300 storm days a year. The lightning storms are so consistent, and they're predicted 3 months in advance. During the wet season in October, you might see 30 lightning flashes in a single minute. At sunset, strong winds flow around the 3 surrounding mountains, forming storm clouds over the water. When the water droplets of humid air collide with ice crystals from the cold air, the static charges cause a lightning storm that happens nearly every night. Off the southern tip of Japan lies the Yonaguni Formation. Archaeologists believe that the monument belongs to a fabled Pacific civilization, like Atlantis, that vanished beneath the waves thousands of years ago. If it's truly a lost civilization, or just nature having a little fun, this is the site to dive into. Features inside the structure resemble stonework like castles, temples, and a stadium, connected by roads and what seems to be large walls all the way around. There are even marks in the stone that appear to show quarry work, faded faces, and rocks sculpted into animal shapes. Some scientists believe that the symmetry of the stones is not as straight as reported. It appears solid rock rather than carved blocks, weathered down by all the water over many years. Plitvice Lakes National Park in Croatia is an interconnected chain of waterfalls, the tallest being 230 feet, and underground water channels, creating natural dams and lakes in such a picturesque environment. Found in the deep woodlands surrounded by meadows brimming with wildflowers, brown bears, gray wolves, lynx, deer, and plenty of rare bird species for birdwatchers call these 115 square miles of the national park home.
There are bridges in the Indian state of Meghalaya that are created entirely of living tree roots. The bridges are made up of tangled thick roots that makes them strong enough to hold over 50 people at a time. The Khasi and Jantia tribes became masters in the art of growing these insane bridges. They need them to cross the streams below with ease. Some of these bridges are over 180 years old. To make them, the members of the tribe care for the roots until they grow long enough to reach the opposite bank. It can take as long as 10 to 15 years to grow a bridge. In the process, the roots become tightly entwined with one another. This is how the bridges get so strong. Some of them are over 100 feet long. And once a bridge is fully grown, it can last over 500 years. While some roots decay, new ones are continually growing. That's why the unusual natural constructions last so long. Visitors to America's Death Valley National Park were stumped and a little bit scared when they found these highly unusual rocks. They appeared to be moving across the sand, all by themselves. There are many rocks that leave telltale signs in their wake. Scientists are baffled. Some of these rocks weigh over 650 pounds, and some of them have already traveled as much as almost 1,000 feet. There are many theories explaining this phenomenon, but the most probable one claims that the stones move because of something called an ice shove. In the winter, parts of the valley fill with water and the rocks at the bottom become frozen. And since ice can rise to the top of liquids, just like in your favorite soda, the rocks slightly lift from the floor, and then they scrape the muddy bottom of the lake bed. When the summer comes, the water evaporates and the ice melts. All that's left is the rocks and their mysterious trails. Volcanoes can not only shoot out burning hot lava, they can also fire lightning. When volcanoes erupt quickly, ash, dust, rock, lava, and gases are all released at breakneck speeds. This creates so much friction that it causes static electricity to build up and then shoot out in the form of lightning. fire tornadoes are also a thing. They form when powerful winds hit an already existing fire and drag it upward into a terrifying column. The US watches at least one of these insane spectacles once a year or so. Some of them can reach heights of over 1,000 feet. One of the coolest and rarest natural phenomenon ever is a moonbow. And yes, it's exactly what you think, a rainbow around the moon. But for this lunar rainbow to appear, the conditions must be super precise. The moon must be low in the sky must be dark. Water droplets must be in the air in the opposite direction of the moon. It'll also help if the moon will be shining bright as a diamond. Moonbows occur when moonlight gets reflected off of water droplets in the air. The light hits the droplet at an angle that alters its direction. There are beaches with glowing water that look as if they come straight out of your favorite sci-fi show. These incredible places can be found all over the world, from the Maldives to Puerto Rico. The mysterious glow is caused by tiny marine algae that live under the water's surface. They give off a bright light whenever waves and currents move them. And beaches start glowing blue, green, or red every time the tiny algae get agitated. Take a flight over the emerald woodlands of Western Australia, and you'll be surprised to find a series of bubblegum pink lakes. If you manage to venture down to the lakes, you're in for a treat. Their waters are completely safe to swim in. Not only will it make for the perfect Instapic, but this water also has incredibly high salinity. This basically means you'll be able to float on its surface. The lakes are surrounded by the deep blue Southern Ocean. Some lakes have their trademark color because they're filled with algae that have high levels of a red-orange pigment. Others are likely to contain tiny microorganisms called haloarchaea. They look red or pink when there's a bunch of them together, and there are people who believe that the lakes have this hue because they're full of bright pink prawns. Light pillars are colorful beams of light that either jet up from Earth towards the sky or shine down from the clouds. Usually, they only occur in cold temperatures as they form when the sunlight gets reflected off of ice crystals floating in the air. The higher the crystals are in the air, the taller these bright and colorful pillars become. They're most common at sunrise and sunset. There are hidden caves all over the world that are filled with glowing light. This light comes from hundreds of glowworms that have made a cozy home in the caves. Some of the caves are more than 30 million years old, and most of them can be found in New Zealand and Australia. The worms themselves don't actually glow, but baby worms called larvae form silk strings made out of mucus. These strings form nets. It's these nets that can illuminate the entire cave. Their purpose is to attract flies and other tasty insects for the glowworms to munch on. Rainbow trees are 100% a real thing. Hailing from the Philippines and Indonesia, these colorful wonders are called rainbow eucalyptus or rainbow gum. The rainbow hues are created by the contrast in colors of old and new bark. As the thin surface layers of bark peel away, they reveal newer ones with brighter, more eye-catching colors. The brand new bark is green, then it changes to purple, then red, and finally brown. This is because the trees contain a substance called chlorophyll. It makes the bark green. As each strip of bark ages, it loses chlorophyll and slowly changes its color. In a desert, you can find beautiful and unique roses made entirely of crystals. They form when sand particles get trapped and compacted during the rain. The quick switch between wet and dry conditions forms the crystals. The crystals, in turn, form a circular series of flat plates. This makes them look like intricate rose petals. And the whole process of their production is 100% natural. Next time you're taking a dip in the ocean, watch out for water spouts. These are basically water tornadoes. In the US, this crazy weather phenomenon is most common in the Florida Keys and the Gulf of Mexico. They often form during storms but can develop on completely calm waters too. Water spouts appear when two wind gusts blowing from different directions hit each other. The collisions make the air move upward, and it drags the water along with it too. Take a look at this. Looks like a forest, right? After all, there are many individual trees here. Well, it's actually just one giant tree. This is the Pando Aspen Grove in Utah. Underneath all that soil, there's a hidden network of roots connecting all these trees together, all 47,000 of them. Technically, this makes the aspens just one massive tree. No one knows how old the Pando Grove is. Some people say it's at least 80,000 years old. Others argue that it's closer to the age of 1 million years. Hidden in upstate New York, there's a mysterious fire that never goes out. What's even weirder is that the fire is concealed behind a waterfall. The flame is around 8 inches tall and it stays lit thanks to a natural gas seep behind the waterfall. The rocks around the waterfall shelter the flame, meaning it barely ever goes out. Think of animals that climb trees. We've got monkeys, cute little sloths, koalas, and most importantly, goats. Wait, what? Goats in Morocco have taught themselves to climb trees so that they can reach their favorite snack, tasty argan fruit. And farmers love this too. Once eaten by the goats, argan nuts pass through their digestive tract and farmers collect them. These nuts are really useful. When they're roasted, ground, mashed, or cold pressed, they turn into argan oil. It works wonders for hair and can be extremely expensive. No surprise farmers are so happy.
This isn't a scene from a movie. A double-decker bus once jumped the gap while London's Tower Bridge was up. Let's go back to the day it happened, the 30th of December, 1952. It was a normal day for the number 78 bus driver, Albert Gunter. He was driving the bus over Tower Bridge toward Shoreditch. Then he noticed that the bridge was opening, and his bus was escalating with the bascule. What do I mean by bascule? The two levered sections of the bridge are named this way. They rise up to an angle of 83 degrees, and each of them weighs over 1,100 tons. The bus was going at just 12 miles per hour when the bascule started to rise. The timing was right, and the other side of the bascule wasn't raised too much. That's how Gunter managed to jump the bus from 3 to 4 feet high above. 13 people were injured, but all passengers stayed alive. How come the bridge was lifted? Back then, a watchman rang a warning bell and closed the gates before the bridge had to be opened. Yet, on that particular day, they somehow forgot to do so. That's why the bus moved further onto the bridge, thinking it was okay. Why were they lifting the sections in the first place? Because there was a ship that needed to pass under. The bus driver, Albert Gunter, said that the traffic light was also green as he drove across the bridge. He said he'd had two options, either to stop the bus and hope someone would notice the bus, or to jump the gap. If he stopped the bus, he could slip back, perhaps fall into the river. Big congrats to this hero without a cape for making the right decision in a split second. Not just a double-decker, but a plane also has a memory of passing through the Tower Bridge. In 1912, a plane had to fly between the bascules and the walkway. The vertical distance between the upper walkways and the deck of the drawbridge is 141 feet. The pilot, Francis McLean, was in a modified float plane that could fit in between. This is how he managed to fly successfully. He was the first person to fly under the walkways. For many of us, it's super risky and frightening. But for him, it was like a piece of cake. He told the press, "It isn't so risky as it appears, for the arches of the bridges are tremendous things when you get close to them." This fellow was a civil engineer, astronomer, pioneering photographer, and aviator. Yeah, sounds like he was the perfect combo for this kind of action. Why did he decide to do this? Thing was, he had an appointment in town. It all happened on a Saturday morning. McLean thought, why wouldn't he go there with his float plane? He took off at 6 a.m. He was at Westminster Pier on a Port of London launch at around 8:30 a.m. Want to hear a story from a prankster who lived in early 1800s London? Theodore Hook and his friend were hanging out as usual. Then they made a bet. Hook bet that he could turn any ordinary house into the most talked about address within a week. The power of a hoax is proven by him. They picked a random house in the city. An ordinary woman named Mrs. Tottingham was living there. Hook wrote numerous letters to many people. from lawyers to cake makers. After a week, guests such as the governor of the Bank of England and the Lord Mayor of London showed up at the door because they had invitations. Not just people, but also the delivery Hooke secretly ordered came along too. The heart of London soon turned to a standstill. Picture this. You woke at 5 a.m. after hearing the doorbell. You see a stranger at the doorstep. He says that he's here to sweep the chimneys. You didn't call anyone for this kind of service, so you sent the man back. A few moments later, someone else knocks on the door. Another sweeper tells you that he has been summoned. Poor Mrs. Tottingham. Her maid had to send 20 more men back. Unfortunately, the prank didn't end there. Things like large coal deliveries and wedding cakes were also addressed to her house. As these deliveries and workers accumulated at the door, other people, such as doctors and priests, approached the house, saying that they were called to minister to someone in the house. Hooke and his friend rented a small room nearby to watch where their bet ended up. People did show up and made Hooke win the bet. Rick Buckley is another person who likes practical jokes, but he is also an artist. In 1997, he modeled his nose and stuck it on various places in London with glue. Pardon? Yes, his aim was to protest against CCTV. Such a creative mixture of prank and art. Initially, he glued the noses around 35 landmarks across London. Amongst all, the 7 noses of Soho are famous. I guess he doesn't like people poking their noses into other people's businesses. It's time for free association. From the noses placed in random places in the city, it's time to jump into older times, when people used toxic cosmetics on their faces for the sake of beauty. I'll refer to a trendsetter of her time, Queen Elizabeth I. She had a major influence on fashion. Not just women's clothes, but also the style of men got influenced by her choice of wardrobe. Here I'm going to talk more about her iconic white look. This look is achieved by a white foundation called ceruse. It's made by mixing white lead and vinegar. In that era, people also wanted to bleach freckles and treat blemishes. These types of cosmetics included ingredients like sulfur, turpentine, and mercury. As you can guess, these ingredients are harmful. They end up leaving the skin gray and shriveled. I'm not even going to mention other health issues magic cosmetics caused. Michael Holmes is a pro skydiver and canopy parachutist. No, he isn't a relative of Sherlock Holmes. He's on my list because he survived against all odds. One day, he was instructing new skydivers. It started as a routine day for him. He was on the plane with 16 students. They were going to jump from 15,000 feet. The process was simple on paper. They would allow a free fall for about a minute and then open their canopies at 5,000 feet. That day, things didn't go as planned. Michael released the parachute and it didn't open. He spent seconds trying to get rid of the main parachute so that he could open the reserve one. As he was struggling, he was also continuously spinning. He described the free fall as, "I was spinning so fast that I was nearly passing out from the G-force." He was in a similar situation before, when he had to unsnag the fine cords between the harness and the canopy. He knew that he had a backup and that this system was safe, so he didn't panic. Well, at least at the beginning. This time he couldn't lose the main canopy. As he was around 4,000 feet, he decided to pull the second parachute, and nothing happened. He was trying to stay calm and find a way to land safely. The lines were still snagged, so the main canopy was still there. He couldn't reach the small knife. He had to cut the lines. What was even worse than spinning was that time was ticking. He was running out of options while moving closer to the ground at a speed of around 80 miles per hour. He had a head camera recording the incident the whole time. After he tried all the options and nothing worked, he waved goodbye to the lens. Luckily, his story didn't end like this. Remember what I said at the beginning? This fellow miraculously survived. He landed on a blackberry bush around 2 miles above Lake Taupo in New Zealand. He didn't have a severe injury. That means a person can fall from the sky and survive if the conditions are right. What would you do if you were in that situation?
If you've ever driven over the Rocky Mountains, you've probably seen road signs for the Continental Divide, the backbone of North America. All watersheds to the west of it run into the Pacific Ocean, and everything on its eastern slope goes straight into the Atlantic. There's just one creek in Wyoming that couldn't choose one side and drains into both oceans at the same time. Two Ocean Creek begins its journey high up in the Teton Range. The snow-capped peaks provide the perfect backdrop as the creek starts its descent, winding its way through alpine meadows and dense forests. As the creek continues its course, it gets to the Two Ocean Pass. This is the geographical crossroads where the creek splits into two branches, the Atlantic Creek and Pacific Creek. The Pacific Creek goes westward and becomes part of the larger Snake River watershed, bringing its waters to the Snake River, which eventually merges with the Columbia River and, finally, reaches the Pacific Ocean. The Atlantic Creek heads eastward and flows into the Yellowstone, Missouri, and Mississippi rivers, and eventually empties into the Gulf of Mexico. If you connect the two creeks' watersheds on a map, you'll get a single blue line between Oregon and Louisiana. Explorers struggling to find the Northwest Passage between the two oceans never knew they could have used the creek. They would just have to use really tiny boats. Some scientists believe that cutthroat trout had better luck in that way. They managed to migrate from the Snake River to Yellowstone River, most likely using the Two Ocean Creek. Technically, fish can travel over 6,000 miles to cover the whole distance from sea to shining sea in fresh water. The creek could be just perfect for that journey. There are hiking trails in Grand Teton National Park that lead to Two Ocean Pass. If you feel adventurous enough, you can stand at the literal crossroads of the continent and see the beginning of two aquatic journeys. Lonar Lake in India popped up literally out of nowhere around 52,000 years ago. Newer data says it could be much older, probably over 500,000 years. At first, scientists were sure that the lake was in an ancient crater of a long-extinct volcano. But then, geologists made a detailed analysis of the soil and water and found out that Lonar Lake has a space origin. The minerals found in its soil are similar to those found in moon rocks brought to Earth during the Apollo program. The lake is an impact crater left by a huge meteorite, which was almost 6 times heavier than the Empire State Building. The impact was so strong that the volcanic rock melted and turned into glass. In 2020, the lake, which was already unusual enough, suddenly turned pink. It wasn't a part of an early Barbie movie marketing campaign. The detailed analysis showed that the water contained an increased level of unique microbes. They accumulate on the surface and emit some pink pigment. After a while, the microbes settled to the bottom and the lake became transparent again. Flamingos that got their food from the lake also got to taste some of the microbes and became an even brighter shade of pink than usual. One of the most famous sights of Yellowstone National Park is the Grand Prismatic Spring. It's one of the largest springs in the world, and it's inspired people who have seen it since at least the 19th century. Back then, a group of trappers mentioned an indigo blue lake boiling like a huge cauldron. Decades later, expeditions came to the spring to study it better and explain its unusual appearance. But because the spring at its widest point is longer than an American football field, they had to build a special vessel and travel far from the shore. The scientists traveling in the boat never wore life vests. They knew those would be useless if the boat tipped over. The water in the middle of the spring is of near boiling temperature, and those vibrant colors are the result of extreme organisms living in the hot water. The temperature changes as you travel away from the center. Different species that don't mind the heat have settled in different parts of the pool, giving it its famous diverse pigments. Back in the early 20th century, someone got the interesting idea to try to irrigate a part of Nevada's Black Rock Desert. They drilled a well and found lots of water, but it was near boiling temperature. The water was clearly not good for agriculture, so the human-made geyser was left abandoned. Over the decades, it slowly turned into an impressive cone of calcium carbonate deposits. Then, in 1964, a geothermal energy company drilled another well close to the first one. The water they had found was of the same temperature. This time, it wasn't hot enough for their needs to produce energy, so they decided to cap the well and leave. But water managed to get up and out, and it completely dried up the first geyser. The second one, which got the name Fly Geyser, is still flowing burning hot water rich in minerals. The cone is multicolored and looks like it's not from this planet, thanks to the algae living in it, which love the heat. Every summer, Caño Cristales in Colombia turns into a liquid rainbow, or the River of Five Colors. At this time, and until the end of fall, the conditions are just right for the riverbed to turn bright red, yellow, green, blue, and black. We owe this beauty to certain aquatic plants growing in the river, a special type of riverweed. During the wet season, the river moves fast and the sun cannot get to these plants. During the dry season, there isn't enough water to feed them, so the time in between the seasons has the perfect conditions for this colorful show. It doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. At some point, the number of tourists who wanted to see it became so huge that scientists got concerned it could be bad for this hotspot of biodiversity. The area is home to rare species of animals, birds, and plants. Now, there are ecotourism trails and strict opening hours. In August 2014, a man in Tunisia was going back home from the north after doing his business. It was a hot summer evening, and he was dreaming about water, when suddenly, it popped up right in front of him. There was a whole lake in the middle of the desert, and the man was pretty sure it hadn't been there several days before. The new body of water got the nickname Mysterious Lake, and actually became a great mystery. Hundreds of people came here to swim in the clear, cool water. The lake became a popular place, but a few days later, the water turned dark green. The locals didn't care about this and continued to bathe in the lake. But when scientists and geologists arrived at the place, they announced that the water was dangerous to swim in. The lake was stagnating. It didn't refresh itself from underground streams, and the rains didn't feed it either. That's why the water became moldy and dirty. The lake contained algae and a lot of harmful bacteria dangerous to the human body. Scientists also found out that the land in this region had phosphate deposits. This substance can decay. But even that didn't stop people from bathing in the lake in the middle of the desert. How it got there remains a mystery. Some experts think that heavy rains have filled a hole in the ground with water. Another, more popular theory says that an earthquake had formed the lake. The seismic activity must have torn the Earth's crust above the water table, and then underground springs had filled the crevice. So, in theory, the lake could drain back out one day, just as suddenly as it had appeared.
When we think of active volcanoes, one region comes to mind: the Ring of Fire in the Pacific Ocean. 3/4 of Earth's volcanoes sit within this belt. Compare the area to Australia, which doesn't have any volcanic activity. The old continent of Europe is also calm, or at least we like to think so. Can you guess what the most active volcano in Europe is? If you thought of Mount Etna on the island of Sicily in Italy, you were right. The volcano has erupted about 200 times and has been far from sleeping in recent decades. The last time this happened was in August 2023. The highest mountain in the Mediterranean is 500 million years old. But in Iceland, there is a much younger volcano. It sprang into action on the 10th of July 2023. In the afternoon, 3 fissures appeared in the ground on a peninsula in the southwest of the island. This was at a base of a small mountain peak. Its name means Little Ram in the local language. The volcano spewed molten lava high into the air. There were also gas plumes in the area. But the scientific community wasn't surprised by the event. They already knew about the volcanic area that stretches between the cities of Reykjavik and Keflavik. Its name is hard to pronounce. Hey, I want to buy a vowel. It had already erupted during the previous 2 summers. This activity came after 8 centuries of dormancy. In the days leading up to the latest eruption, seismologists, the scientists who study earthquakes, recorded over 12,000 tremors. When the ground opened up in July, the fissures were over 1.5 miles long. The following morning, 2 of them closed. All the lava was now coming out of the last fissure. It grew into an elongated cone, the simplest shape of volcano we are all familiar with. The lava soon filled a large crater. It grew almost 100 feet tall during the first week, and it is still growing. On the night when the eruption started, lava spread out in all directions. Its cinders set ablaze the dry moss in the vicinity. Local authorities closed off the surrounding area. There were toxic gases from the volcanoes and smoke from the burning moss. Firefighters flocked to the area. After a week, they proclaimed the area safe. Visitors soon came to witness the birth of Europe's youngest volcano. This form of tourism is quite developed in Iceland. People come from all over the world to watch active volcanoes. The land of fire and ice is home to more than 130 volcanoes. Some 30 of them are active. Now, I know what you're thinking right now. Is volcano tourism safe? In Iceland, it is. The country's authorities research and constantly monitor all of the hotspots. The island is dotted with several dozen seismic stations. These help researchers accurately predict future eruptions, and emergency services are accustomed to these sorts of events. They can quickly cordon off danger zones. This is what happened in 2010. A volcano in the south of the island, the name of which everyone struggled to pronounce, erupted. It spewed out a plume of steam and ash that was 7 miles high. This wasn't a fun time to be an air traveler. Winds carried the enormous plume southeast toward northern Europe. Many countries closed their airspace for several days for safety reasons. The volcano erupted in March, but the Earth was shaking from January the same year, so seismologists knew that an eruption was approaching. When it comes to the continent's youngest volcano, the tourist infrastructure is already there. Visitors can leave their cars at a designated parking lot. Then they go on a 5-hour-long trek. This leads to a viewing deck. Tourists are so close to the epicenter that they can feel the heat haze from the crater. The sight is the most impressive at nighttime. Safety is never a concern. Scientists regularly chart out hazard maps that outline the borders of lava fields. This way, visitors who stick by the rules are never in harm's way. More than a week after the eruption started, a section of the crater collapsed. Lava flowed downhill west of the volcano. This majestic smoldering hot river is slow-moving lava. Scientists categorize it as an AA type. The term is Hawaiian. It describes basaltic lava that has a rough and brittle surface. The flow is composed of broken lava blocks that are called clinkers. They fall off as the substance flows. This reveals red-hot areas. The cooler sections of lava are gray and black in color. When it moves forward, it produces a distinctive sound like shattering glass. Nearly a month after the eruption of the new volcano, we got aerial footage of an interesting phenomenon. A tornado formed directly over the lava flow. This occurs due to the high temperatures in the area. When the conditions are right, a column of heated air can easily turn into a mini tornado. Scientists observed a similar event happen during the 2018 eruption of Mount Kilauea in Hawaii. The lava fields of Europe's second-largest island tell the story of the creation of Iceland. It sits above the place where the North American and Eurasian plates meet each other. Tectonic plates are huge, rocky chunks of Earth's most outer layer. There are roughly 20 of them. They rest on a partially molten layer of rock. All the lava we see on the surface starts its journey here. You could say that these plates float on molten rock. Their boundaries are unstable, so when 2 plates grind past each other, they release tremendous amounts of energy. The formation of volcanoes is one result. These are places where the molten rock travels upward to the surface. Iceland began to form some 60 million years ago. The tectonic plates under the ocean drifted apart. Enough lava piled up on the surface to create solid ground. This ancient rock is under the waves today. As new lava reaches the surface and cools down, it pushes the old rock away from the center of the island. That's why the oldest parts of Iceland aren't 60, but only 16 million years old. The country's active lava fields are young in geological terms. Some of them are under 1,000 years old. Scientists consider the island a hot spot for volcanoes, pun intended. Nearly a third of the basaltic lava that reaches the Earth's surface in recorded history came from Icelandic eruptions. Fissure swarms, like the ones before the 2023 eruption, cover 30% of the Nordic country. For this reason, only a quarter of the island is inhabited. Norse Vikings were the first people to settle in Iceland at the beginning of the 10th century. Nature threw them a loud welcoming party. Just a few years after their arrival, they witnessed one of the greatest volcanic eruptions in history. Vikings came from a region without volcanoes, so they had no clue as to what was going on. Today, Icelanders are used to such events. This is good because their homeland is entering a new era of volcanic activity. Volcanologists suspect that recent events are an introduction to decades of more frequent eruptions. The peninsula that is home to Earth's youngest volcano is just 17 miles southwest of Iceland's capital city. It's been dormant for a long time. Present-day eruptions there are a reminder that the natural processes that created Iceland are still ongoing. Recently, scientists discovered that there's a historical link between volcanic eruptions in the north of Europe and glaciers. Our planet went through at least 5 major ice ages. These were exceptionally lengthy periods when the average temperature on Earth dropped. The result was the expansion of ice sheets across northern Europe and North America. The last ice age ended some 10,000 years ago. Researchers are still trying to fully understand how these glacial periods affected volcanic activity. They suspect that the sheer weight of all that ice disrupts the flow of magma underground. When glaciers retreat, the pressure is lifted. This makes it easier for lava to flow upward to the surface where it bursts.